26. If the applicant is here, please stand up to the side so we know you're here. Thank you.
Tawanda Anthony, Land Development. Application number VRB 1926. The property address is 177 Cypress Avenue. Per section 27290.5, the applicant is seeking to reduce the rear yard setback from 5 feet to 1 foot to allow for a pool screen enclosure. The property is zoned RS75 and was purchased in 2017. The single-family residence, including existing pool, was built in 2018. Here's the aerial. Here's the property. It's a corner lot. This is Cypress and Blanca Avenue. There's a view of the structure from the front. Here's a view from the corner. And here's a view showing the rear of the property. And this is the site plan. And they're requesting to reduce the rear setback from 5 feet to 1 foot to allow for the pool screen enclosure. And you can see the existing pool here.
Okay. Is that it?
Yes. Any questions for staff?
No questions yet. Applicant, please state your name and address and if you've been sworn.
Anthony Severino, Bajo Cuva, Conan Turkel, 100 North Tampa Street, Suite 1900. I have been sworn. First, I'd like to real briefly address the actual variance that is requested. There's a little bit of, I think, confusion on the application. I'm just going to put this here. So the original application, as you'll see here, general setback variance of 1 foot 8 inches on eastern perimeter, rear property line facing Blanc Avenue, plus the 1 foot setback variance on the northern perimeter. And so we're actually not asking to go from 5 foot to 1 foot, 5 feet to 1 foot. Actually, if you see here, here's the pool, water's edge right here, which is 5 feet from the property line. Then here's the deck, which is about 1.5 feet, 2 feet. It varies based on the property line back here because it's not a straight line. So here we actually want to go from 5 feet to 4 feet. Here from 5 feet to 3 feet 4 inches. So it's less than the 5 to 1. And I would like to show a picture that I do not believe is in the record yet, just to give you an idea of where this is going to go, and I have an extra copy. Let's see if we can start to zoom out here. Okay, so the proposed screen enclosure is actually going to be right here on the edge of the deck right here. This is where the variance is requested, and it'll actually come all the way along here and then come out this way. The home was originally purchased. As you can see, there's obviously no pool screen on there now. Actually, the house directly to the east is a very similar home that has a similar pool, similar size, and it has no pool screen. And the original intent of the owners was not to have a pool screen, was to have open air, an open air pool. But it just became so much of a problem where right now they're cleaning the pool every single morning. Pool guy comes once a week, and they're cleaning the filter every single morning. And I actually had this past weekend, the pool was cleaned Saturday, and the pool filter Sunday morning looks like this. And these are the leaves from mainly 2 trees on the rear neighbor's property. One is an oak, one is a magnolia tree. And there's nothing else that can be done with those trees. I've spoken to Mr. Knox. They can't be cut down. Obviously, they're not on my client's property. They can't really be trimmed anymore. So it's an issue that can't be really rectified for the homeowners without a pool screen enclosure, which is affecting their use and enjoyment of the pool, and really just becoming a major hassle to clean these. And this is just a picture. These are just pictures. Again, here, this is just the next morning. They've inquired about getting a creepy crawler before trying to get a pool screen. Pool company said no because the magnolia leaves, it'll burn it up within about a day. So they've done everything they can up to this point. Didn't apply for this until December, I believe, of last year. So kind of went through the fall, and that's where it really became a major issue. I'd like to also I want to also address just briefly the neighbors to the rear. This isn't going to affect their view of anything. If you actually look at the aerial, which you should have in the staff report, you can see just how overgrown it is. Right here, if we zoom in. And you can barely see the pool, it's right here. And all of these trees right here are on the neighbor's property. The neighbor's house is right here. Then there is one tree that's over here that is actually jointly owned by the two neighbors. My client owns, I think, 75% of it. They own 25%, and that's why the fence comes around it that way. That tree's also been somewhat of an issue. That cannot be cut out either. I've talked to Mr. Knox about that. So they're left with, this is kind of their last resort, and it really is affecting the useful enjoyment of the pool. They didn't intend to have a pool cage, like I said. The house right next to them, very similar home, very similar pool. They don't have a pool cage, but they don't have neighbors' trees with debris and leaves falling into the pool. So we would respectfully request that the board grant this variance, which again, like I said, is less than the 5-to-1. It's a foot in one section and I believe a foot and 8 inches in another section. Thank you, and that's it for my presentation.
Anyone in the audience that wants to speak on this application? If so, please come on. Name, address, and if you've been sworn.
Yep. Name is Joseph Breineman, 164 Biscayne Avenue, and we're immediately behind the subject property.
Have you been sworn?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
we all have. Well, a couple items. One has to do with the setback, and as you talk about 5 feet to 1 foot, it's actually no setback, because on the application you can see to the left of the general statement, it also includes the gutter and the eaves. If you put the gutter and eaves on there, it's no setback. But our basic argument is not that part, but the fact of having the 5-foot setback being changed. It's already at the edge of what was allowed. And we have a couple pictures here. That's the view from our backyard right now. And you can see it overlooks our backyard. And if you put a pool enclosure up, it will come that much closer to our backyard. And that's basically why we object. And let me introduce my son-in-law, Guy King. I think you have a couple other points.
Guy King, 4507 Bayshore Boulevard, Tampa, Florida, 33611. I've been sworn.
Okay.
Mr. Reineman was kind of shocked a little bit by this original house, and as you can see, the windows at the top look right down into their backyard. That very tight shot you saw from council of their pool and the side of the pool, and then you saw the palm trees. Those are those same palm trees. Okay, so this pool is right up to those palm trees. If they only had 1 foot, I'm not sure how they would live in between that pool screen and this fence, or if they would just take them out completely. So we don't know how high that's going to be, but it's going to be 5 feet, or it's going to be right on the property line. And so he went from having blue sky to black sky to people peering in his property to now they want to get even closer. And I understand how they're struggling, but they took the chance. I mean, they built the pool ahead, and they went ahead and did that. And so it was kind of like this is self-created. And when we went through the 5 criteria that y'all consider, we went the first one, alleged hardships or practical difficulties are unique and singular with respect to this property. This property is typical. It's not different, and it's a corner lot, and it's not unique. And the 5 foot is not required for this. Number 2, the hardship does not result from actions of the applicant. This was a self-created hardship. The pool is a luxury and not an essential living space. Therefore, this hardship is self-created, and why should we have to fix by accepting a variance? Why should we have to fix their error? And number 3, the variance if granted will not substantially interfere or injure health, safety, welfare, or others whose property could be affected by the allowance. The Reinemans are immediately behind it, and they get the full impact of the home, and now they're going to get it of this screening. And we still don't know how tall the screening is. If it's over 15 feet, for every foot taller than 15 feet, they have to be back another foot. And that's the way I read it anyway. Is that correct? Okay. So we haven't heard how tall it's going to be. And the variance is in harmony and serves a general purpose. No, it's not in harmony, because it's self-created once again and will negatively impact the value of their property. And allowing the variance will result in substantial justice being done. No, the public benefit is maintaining the 5-foot setback significantly outweighs the absence of any hardship to the applicant. So,
You got about 20 seconds.
all right. Well, I will yield my time to our third speaker.
Thank you very much. You know the routine.
Yes. Hello, my name is Deborah King. I reside at 4507 Bayshore Boulevard, Tampa, Florida, 33611, and I have been sworn in. This is a single-family, one-story home. The lovely backyard, it's hard to tell in this picture because there's no foliage, but it's got a paved patio with a 3-tiered fountain, a wrought iron gate with a lovely rose garden, so it's a beautiful setting. The privacy has been taken by the 2-story house, and that is it. Happens, but the thing, if you put a large structure back there, I feel that it will not only, it's taking the privacy away to begin with, but that it will not be very attractive and will deter from the value of the home from lack of privacy and an unpleasant structure back there. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wants to speak on this application? Okay, seeing none, board, do you have any questions for anybody or staff?
I do, and we would need to have those photographs submitted to the record. If you wouldn't mind submitting those to the record. And actually, I'm going to ask a question about that last photo that you just had up. So if you wouldn't mind, yes, ma'am, if you wouldn't mind just leaving that up on the, there, or there. Thank you. Yeah, I had a couple of questions. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind putting that back up for, and then my question is for the applicant. Thank you. All right, so the question is, what is the height of the proposed screen enclosure? Is it a 1 or 2 story screen enclosure?
It's got a full and half gable. It is, right now, it is, I believe on the plans, 16.6, and I'm going to put up the site plan, and we're fine knocking that down to 15. I mean, I think we agreed to do that.
Do me a favor, just so I can understand it. We're looking at a shot of the back of that house.
Yes.
Can you show me on that photograph where the height, where the top level of that screen enclosure is going to go?
It's going to go approximately here.
Okay, so over the top of that.
Yeah,
And
so
you're
here-
saying you'd be okay with knocking it down to where?
To 15 feet,
Okay, which would be right where you were drawing a line or lower?
about right there.
Okay.
It's about, and here's, I don't know if you have this, let's see if I can zoom out for you. This is the actual plan for the pool screen.
Okay, and the neighbor referenced the 1 foot. You said you're actually going to 3 feet 4 inches, right?
Yeah, so we're actually going to go from 5 feet to 4 feet, and I can show you here. Get that again, so you have
But
it.
that's what you're proposing is 3 feet 4 inches at the closest point.
Right.
Okay. They mentioned eaves and gutters. Are there going to be any eaves and gutters, or is there any need to encroach any further than that for eaves and gutters on the screen encroach?
No, there's no need to encroach any further.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Could you blow up the screen enclosure diagram for us?
Yes.
And I'd like to have that entered into the record.
I am, I've got a couple things. I
Okay,
can get
all
through.
right.
Let me know how far you want me to.
Well, a little more, because I got really bad eyesight. Okay, so help us out in understanding this. When we're looking at the portion of the screen enclosure, what part of these are the walls? Like the part at the bottom, or is that roof?
Yeah, so that's actually, that's roof, this is like a cross section. So this down here is gonna be the gable, so it'll be going like
Gables
this.
or hips? Do you know the difference?
I do not, no, I'm sorry.
It's huge. Mr. Architect, you want to help us out? I mean, we can't give testimony. This looks
They
like
look
a hip
hips.
drawing to me.
Yeah, they look like hips.
Okay, a hip is where the wall height is the same all the way around,
Yes,
and then the roof goes up from that constant wall height. That would be a hip.
yes.
A gable would go up even higher and
Yeah.
usually make like a triangle.
And so they had on here, that's why I say that, I'm not an architect, half gable into full gable, which you see right here, but the wall height is, my understanding, going to be, right now on here it says 13.6, but we would reduce that down so that we stay at the 15.
Oh, wait, that 13.6, well, again, I'm having a difficulty reading this drawing. I'm trying to understand what this drawing tells us as far as wall height.
13.6 right now,
Is 13.6.
Correct.
And you're willing to drop that to what?
to 12,
To 12.
which would make the whole structure 15 feet.
Drop everything down.
Yeah, everything would be dropped down about 1.5 feet.
Okay. Okay. Is that That answered
Can I
my
make a
question.
comment?
Well, hang on, does anybody else have any other questions? Well, I have one more question of the applicant. You did show the palms that are planted, those are on your property
Yes.
owner's property.
Yes.
And about how tall are those palms today, and about how much taller will they get if allowed to grow?
I would say right now they're probably 6.5 feet based on,
If you put the other photograph up from the neighbor,
do they?
I believe there was a fence already installed. Is that the neighbor's fence or your?
That is the
property?
applicant's fence.
Is that a 6-foot-high fence?
Yes.
How much higher are the palm trees?
Right now, I'd say they're probably about 9 feet.
Okay.
So they're about 3 feet
And-
higher than the fence.
Do you think those palms will continue to grow?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank
Excuse
you.
me, you've asked him
Well,
about
wait,
how
I
palms
know,
grow.
I know.
And we got
I'm-
this guy over here,
I'm-
and then you had him draw a
I'm not
line
saying- I'm
on
not
where
saying-
it was, like.
I'm not saying we're not going to give you an opportunity to talk. Go ahead.
I'm going to ask Mr. King, please, I have a question for you, and that will give you an opportunity to talk, okay? You heard the applicant talk about the change from 1 foot to 3 feet, 4 inches at the closest point, 4 feet further, and that there are no eaves and gutters, so they're not going any closer than that. You heard that, and you also heard some information about the proposed height and saw a general drawing of that. I just want to know if that impacts in any way your position, and that'll also give you an opportunity to comment.
Well, before I answer your question, I was just.
Well, it would be great if you could answer my question
Okay.
and then talk.
I thought that was progress. But then I'm not the homeowner. My father-in-law, Joe Ryanman, is. So,
Well, you guys can talk amongst yourselves. We don't mind.
right, okay. But I wanted to,
You
I
do
wanted to
get
get
along,
some
right?
clarification before I talk to Joe.
Okay.
And when you have him draw, the council draw the line, or like, where do you think it's gonna be, and how tall you think those palms are gonna be? I mean, that's my hobby, and I know those palms, that's it, that's about it. They're gonna get a little bit higher, and that's about it, and then they start falling over, okay? The line here, I mean, is, we're gonna have this huge thing in his backyard, and he says it's gonna be 15 feet with the gables, is that what y'all understand? With the gables?
About, yes.
All right, so that would be the maximum height. Okay, can we come up here with a to scale line of where that's gonna be? And I think if you see that, you're gonna go like, gosh, that has really impacted those 5 things, because of those 5 aspects, those 5 criteria, they didn't reach any of them. I mean, it wasn't like there was like 2 or 3 or something like
Okay,
that.
well, we need to stick to the questions, if
Okay.
you don't mind, and I
So let's
appreciate
repeat the
everything you
question.
said.
Please.
Pardon?
Well, I think you did a fine job of responding to the questions, and I appreciate that. And I guess in response, the applicant's going to get a rebuttal, and I suspect that he's going to speak about some of
Once
the
again, I'm
things-
not the agent, I'm the son-in-law, okay? So
I'm
if
talking
I didn't
about
show
this
up-
gentleman to
okay.
your left.
I know, but
The
he's
applicant.
the one that needs to make a case. I was just my opinion. I'm just the guy,
Does
he
does
drug along, you know what I mean?
We can ask him the same question. Does he understand that the applicant is not going to 1 foot, he's going to 3.4 feet? Do you understand that?
I don't understand how you could do that. You're gonna be over water now.
Right?
Okay,
Because the pool's already there.
Well, the testimony is the edge of the deck, the existing deck is 3.4 feet away from the property line. That's the testimony. Okay? He's saying he doesn't need to go 1 foot away. That would put the palms on the inside of the screen enclosure if he didn't remove them. So what he's said is that he's gonna go on the other side of the palms. The palms would, I don't know if they'll stay or not, but they could stay, okay? So we're trying to understand, the physical aspects, have everybody agree that, yeah, okay, this is what they're now asking for. And the question for the backyard neighbor was, would that change his mind at all? And the answer is, Mr. Backyard Neighbor?
No, I think you still have a problem.
Okay, all right.
One more question.
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Golden.
And this is for the applicant. Is it your intent, it's your intent to leave those palm trees in that location?
I do not know the homeowner's intent. I can tell you, though, if it's an issue that would help resolve this and allow the pool cage to be built, then we can certainly work with the neighbors on those palm trees if that's an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? All right, if not, I'll move to close the public hearing without objection. Open for board discussion and/or a motion.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
I don't know if I got a
Excuse
rebuttal.
me, you didn't get your
I
5
didn't
minutes.
get a rebuttal. I don't have much.
I'm sorry, I'm late.
It'll be just a minute.
Yeah,
'cause
go ahead with
It
your
is getting late.
rebuttal.
I want to address a couple things that all three who spoke in opposition spoke about. One is the value of the property being affected by putting this pool screen in. There's no evidence that the value of the property is going to be adversely affected. In fact, it's the opposite. I've got the property tax record. Since this house was built, the value of their property's increased. I went on Zillow, which I know is not property records, but from the time the house was completed to today, the house has increased in value over $100,000. So I don't think there's going to be a negative impact of putting a screen to further increase the value of the homeowner's house, the applicant's house. And something I think that's important is the hardship was not created by the homeowner by putting the pool in. The hardship was created by these trees. There was never an intent to put a screen on. That wasn't it. I mean, you can see, and I want to show this real quick because I think it's important, just of the aerial of the neighbor. I mean, it's almost an identical house with almost an identical pool, albeit the pool is a little smaller, but same shape, same footprint. And they don't have a screen, and that's what homeowners intended to do. And it just so happened that there was nothing that could be done ultimately with this foliage here that comes over onto their property, and they've tried ways to deal with it, and this is basically the last resort is getting this variance so that they can enjoy the pool. Lastly, there were some issues that the pool is already at 5 feet. That's the requirement. That's what it's supposed to be at. That's the setback. It's at 5 feet. The front property line of the house is 25 feet from the sidewalk. So this really isn't a matter of necessarily constructing things differently or being the homeowner being the creator of this issue. It truly was supposed to be an open air pool, and the trees just caused the issue, which according to Mr. Knox, the trees can't come out anyways. There's 2 oaks and 1 magnolia, I believe. So we would respectfully request that the board grant this variance, specifically the amended variance which we've requested, which is the 5 to 4, 5 to 3, 4, and then also the reduced height to 15. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize for cutting your time off. All right, so I now move to close the public hearing if there's no objection for board discussion and vote. Anybody like to make a motion? Anybody have anything to say?
I think it's pretty clear this is a self-created hardship since the house is less than a year old and the people that built the house are the people requesting the variance. I do wish the city could reconcile the code between the pools and screen enclosures because we do get 1 or 2 of these a month. And if we just didn't allow pools to go so far, we wouldn't have this issue. I think my opinion's long been that when the variance is a request on the rear yard, that the most important person in that case is the rear neighbor, whereas front yards are for the neighborhood and side yards are have multiple parties involved sometimes. The rear yard is really between the rear neighbor. In this case, we have opposition. It is self-created. I can't support it.
Anybody else have any?
Yeah, I'm gonna differ with Mr. Pastor on this one. And I recognize what he's saying, and he's right in the sense of, you know, it's unfortunate that we have these situations where we have a builder we have a pool that gets constructed, and then a year later, there's the application that comes in for, we'd really like that screen enclosure, and we see that a lot. I am trying to reconcile that, though, with the impact of the off-site trees, and how those off-site trees could have been an unanticipated consequence in this situation. And the testimony that was presented was all this information about how often that pool is getting clogged up with those leaves, essentially making it unusable, and impacting their property and the ability to use that property. And so under these circumstances and with that information, I can see that as a hardship. And with the modifications that were made to the application, I could see approving this, particularly because this is an applicant who is attempting and even offering further to work with the backyard neighbor to try and make it as acceptable as possible. So with that in mind, I could support it, but I understand your position.
Any other comments?
And I think it makes a difference
say
too,
something?
because, I mean,
Do you want to say?
I think
anything else, or-
I believe there are other mechanisms that could help the pool, the leave issue. They have automated screens that pull right over the water top that you can retract when you want to use it. That doesn't affect the neighbor. I understand the hardship of the trees and that they maybe didn't intend to leave. I thought the same thing, but that doesn't change the hardship on the rear neighbor who had no involvement in any of this issue. The trees were already there. The pool was just built. It's still creating a burden on the distance that code allows from that neighbor to have from their neighbor, and we would be reducing that allowable at no fault of the rear neighbor. So I do see it from both sides. However, if you look at which one was more culpable for the creation of the incident, I think it's the one that built the pool, not the one that owns the trees. And I do think there are other mechanisms to control leaves in a pool that maybe aren't the same as a screen. So I still maintain my position.
Anybody else want to weigh in?
yeah, I'll respond if anyone else.
Well, the only thing I'm going to say slightly different is we didn't really hear any testimony on why the pool was built where it was. We heard testimony that they didn't want a screen enclosure. We've had a lot of cases in the past where that's been the hardship. We changed our mind. Welcome to Florida. We usually hear the argument about mosquitoes. Didn't hear that one tonight. But I agree with Mr. Pasteur that I'm a little bit surprised that our code doesn't address screen enclosures somewhat differently. I think there has to be a minimum, obviously, setback, something that would at least allow some landscaping to take the curse off of the enclosure for the adjacent neighbor, whether it's a side yard or a rear yard neighbor. We've had cases where the side yard could be just as obtrusive, you know, as the rear. I don't think in this particular case that because they are now reducing it to 3.4 feet and 4 feet, we're talking a foot to 18 inches. It's not from the perception of what the rear yard neighbor will see from his back or their backyard. I don't think you could tell if somebody went out there and moved the enclosure that 12 or so inches, you know, and did it at night and you came out the next morning. I don't think you'd tell. Especially if there was vegetation that maintained itself or was allowed to be maintained, separating the screen enclosure from the fence, the 6-foot high fence, which already is, you know, a decent amount of the structure. You know, we did hear the rear yard neighbor objecting to the large house being built behind them. Well, the property owner has a right to build that house, and unfortunately in neighborhoods like Davis Island where there are floodplains and FEMA rules, you have to build your house up to begin with. And you know, those rules are going up even higher this year. So the people living in one-story houses are going to continue to feel like they're being, like their life is being changed without their ability to control it. And that's correct if you're not willing to buy the property next to you to control it. And I'm not suggesting that people have to do that, but the applicant had the right to build what they built, and I think I would have had a real problem if they had come in for the 1 foot. I totally agree. But the fact that they are willing to pull it back, I think I could approve it.
Mr. Brown made one of the 2 points that I was going to make in response, which is they can, by right, build this exact same pool enclosure at the 5-foot line, and there's nobody that can say a word about it.
Correct.
And the height of the house and all these other things, there's really nothing to be said about it. It's just, it is what it is. The other point that I was going to make in response is I appreciate the sensitivity to neighbor, to neighbor objections. But if that was the overriding concern always, these folks don't live in these houses forever. And when we get no objections to an application and we say, oh, the neighbors must be okay with it, there's a neighbor after them that has to live with that, and they might not be okay with that. And so we want to always be sensitive to these things, and we want to always look to minimal impacts and how we can address those impacts. And that's why, as Mr. Brown pointed out, and as I agree, the 1 foot to me probably would have been unacceptable. The 3-4 is a lot more in line, and the 4 feet at the other end, we're talking about 1 foot, and they couldn't make hay about anything if it was at 5 feet. So to me, it's a minimal impact, and they're doing everything they can, and that's why I'm okay with it.
But I do concur that it's self-created.
I disagree that 1 foot doesn't make a difference because, yeah, difference between 5 feet and 4 feet is one thing, but what we're talking about is the difference between a wide open space that these palm trees can hang into and a vertical next to a 6-foot fence that are 4 feet apart, that nobody can maintain those trees. So those trees are providing privacy right now. Do we reasonably think that in a 4-foot gap, a 3-foot gap between a screen and a fence, that trees can be maintained? No, they can't. At the very least, the whole canopy on that side is going to be pressed up against the screen. They're going to either die, or they're going to have to be removed, or they're going to become unwieldy. So it's not just the lateral distance on the ground, it's the vertical implications of that distance, and is it functional? And I say no, it's not.
Does our landscape expert have an
not
opinion?
Like going into landscape, will note that they said that they would be willing to remove the palms if that was one of our conditions, but.
Right, but we haven't heard withdrawal from the opposition. So,
Right.
although we said they might work it out with the neighbor has not withdrawn their opposition, so to me, they're still opposing it.
Yeah, when this went from, 1 foot to 4 foot, I was more inclined to support it, but at the end of the day, I'm still having a hard time understanding the hardship beyond just leaves, that when we built the house, when we built the pool, the trees existed, and I'm presuming we're probably overhanging the property even further when it was constructed. So with that said, I would say that I oppose it at this time, unless somebody else has something else.
And I would just add, not for council to respond to right now, but this kind of goes back to my question of a previous case. You know, when are trees hardships and when are they not hardships? Now we're talking about tree leaves being hardships. So, you know, it gets back to, I think the answer that council would probably give me is that the alleged hardship or practical difficulty. Now, is it unique and singular? No, it's not. So, you know, there's a good argument on
I think you're right,
both sides.
that there probably is a practical difficulty to the leaves.
Yeah.
But
It's not unique and singular.
when you weigh all the hardship criteria, is it enough? I don't think it is. So I think you're right, it is a practical difficulty.
Yeah. And in this case, again, we didn't hear enough
That
testimony.
existed when they
Right.
built it.
Correct. And it got built the way it got built. Somebody If somebody had said, are you gonna screen this? Yes, we're definitely gonna screen it. Oh, the code is 5 feet. We need to plan accordingly. Do we have room to do that when we build the house? We don't know the answer to that because that wasn't testified.
And I think I've stated previously, but since I've been on this board, that these seem to come up a lot, where the pools are built first and then they come back later and ask for a screen. And I know that, yeah, and I know they say that that wasn't the intent in this case, but it seems to be pretty common.
So, does somebody want to make a motion?
Are we going to be able to pass the motion?
Well, we won't know until we vote.
Move the variance request for case VRB 1926 for the property located at 177 Cypress Avenue for a reduction in the rear yard from 5 feet to 1 foot or 3.4 feet with an encroachment of eaves and gutters be denied due to the failure of the petitioner to meet its burden of proof to provide competent substantial evidence in the record at this public hearing of an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty when considering the 5 hardship criteria as set forth in section 2780 of the city code. Specifically that this hardship was self-created by the construction of a pool with the existing trees, that we have opposition from the rear neighbor who this affects most directly, and that construction of the screen at the location proposed would prevent adequate maintenance of the landscaping that exists, which provides screening for that rear neighbor.
Mr. Proster has made a motion for denial. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. DePapa. All in favor of denial? Vote aye.
Aye.
3 ayes. All opposed?
Nay.
Nay. So we have a 3-2 vote. Don't think it'd make any sense to go the other way.
It doesn't sound that way. So then this will be held until your next regular meeting, which will be in March.
Now we're up to 14? March 12th. I mean, that's automatic. That's not a consensus. All right, you'll have to come back in March.
Do we need to renotice or do anything, or just show up in March?
All right.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll have 6 or 7 board members.
And then will it be the same procedure in March? We'll kind of start over and
Yeah.
redo it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough. Thank you very much for your
You're
time.
welcome. Okay. Next case is VRB 19-27.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, this is application number VRB 1927. The property address is 3215 West Barcelona Street. Per section 27156, the applicant is seeking to reduce the side yard setback from 7 feet to 3 feet to construct a bedroom addition. The property is zoned RS50 and was purchased in 2008. The existing single-family residence was built in 1939. Here's an aerial. Well, this is the property. This is Barcelona. This is a view of the front of the property. There's a view looking west. This is a view looking east. And this is the site plan of the property. The hatched area, the red line is the 7-foot side yard line, and this is the area that they're encroaching into where they're requesting a setback reduction. Any questions?
I don't see any. Applicant, come forward, state your name, address, and if you've been sworn.
Good evening. My name is Alan Dobbs with Florida Design Studio. Our address is 5502 North Cherokee Avenue in Tampa, 33604. My client, Daniel, or Dan and Layla, as was mentioned, bought the house in 2008. They have since had 2 children, so their family has grown. Their house is a relatively small house compared to a lot of the surrounding houses. And also, I don't know if you saw on the zoning map, there's quite a bit of RM zoning around this property as well. The existing house is only 946 conditioned square feet. It has an open front porch and an unconditioned enclosed rear porch. So the gross area under roof is 1,246 square feet. The house does have a carport in the back, and it appears to be original to the property. And then the house was built in 1939. It's kind of interesting. It looks like it might have been built a little bit sooner, but according to the property appraiser's website, it was built in 1939. I'm going to start by showing the sort of the site plan, but has a floor plan. The yellow you can see is kind of lightly screened, but the house is a 2-bedroom house currently. You have the 2 bedrooms over here, a bathroom. It does have fixtures in it, just didn't draw them because we aren't doing work in that area. And then there's a little den over here, dining, kitchen. And you can see the kitchen is fairly modest. The utility porch is unconditioned space. So when we started looking at, because their children are getting older, their daughter is 8 years old now, so they want to have an extra bedroom. So each of their kids have their own room. So the options for adding on to a bedroom is to go up. Well, that's not really feasible just for 1 bedroom because then you have to build a stair, and also they want to do a bathroom, add a second bathroom. So that just does not make it feasible given the existing conditions. The next option is on this side of the house. There's really no option because the driveway comes down here and goes over here into the carport. So we can't add to the side. We really can't add back in this area because it would impede your flow into the carport. Obviously, we can't add to the front. Onto the side, we already have this existing den that is already encroaching on the setback. And along this side, we have the dining room with a couple windows, and then we have the kitchen. So we can't add on the back here because this is unconditioned space. So adding to the side here is not feasible. But even if we did, we're still going to have to encroach on the setback. And then adding to the rear, anything to the rear is going to just take up that much more property on a relatively small lot. My clients, they purchased this house. They basically have done nothing other than redo the kitchen and maintain the house. So the most sensible place for the addition was to take the existing den and create an area where we could have a bathroom, a small vestibule that also has the closet, because the area that we have for the bedroom, roughly 10 by 10, it does meet the minimum size requirements for a bedroom, and it has egress, but also it has a closet. That's why this is all part of a suite, because a closet's required for a bedroom as well. So that was really our only option, to add a bedroom. So, so I wanted to go through the hardship criteria. The first one is that the alleged hardships or practical difficulties are unique and singular with respect to the property and structure. Well, it is unique that this is one of the few original houses in this neighborhood, and they wish to maintain it. It's smaller than most of the properties in the area. Most of the people buying properties in this area will tear the house down and rebuild it. The second, the hardships and practical difficulty does not result from the actions of the applicant. Self-created hardships or practical difficulty shall not justify a variance. It's kind of funny, my client asked me, does having kids create a self-imposed hardship? And I said, no, it does not. So the third, so to address that particular one, the existing house was built in 1939, and as I mentioned before, the current owners have made no significant alterations to the property. The third one, the variance, if granted, will not substantially interfere or injure the health, safety, and welfare of others whose property would be affected. Well, the neighbor directly to the west is not opposing this. The existing den already sort of encroaches on that setback, and the area that we're doing is very minimal. And we feel like we're not imposing on them. The fourth one is that it's in harmony with and serves the general intent and purpose of this chapter. I'm just going to read what I have. The requested variance is consistent with the general intent and purpose of this chapter and the adopted Tampa Comprehensive Plan. The fifth and last one, allowing the variance will result in substantial justice being done considering both the practical or public benefits and intended to be secured by this chapter and the individual hardships or practical difficulties that will be suffered due to the failure of the board to grant the variance. I'll read my response. The variance will allow the addition of a modest size bedroom and bathroom to a smaller home in a neighborhood where most of the homes are larger and or could accommodate this type of addition without a variance. The variance would provide relief, substantial justice, and allow for the hardships and practical difficulties to be addressed. So with that, conclude my presentation.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this application, either for or against?
You can speak if you like.
Please come forward, state your name, address, and if you've been sworn.
Dan Ringhoff, 3215 West Barcelona Street, Tampa, Florida, 33629. And yes, I have been sworn. And my wife and I are the owners of the property, and we purchased it shortly after we were married, about 5 months or so after we were married. And we've owned it a little over 10 years, and it's been sufficient for our needs up until this point. And we had 2 children. My daughter's 8, and my son's 6. He'll be 7 shortly. So we're really kind of outgrown the 946 of conditioned space. And I just want to just provide a little brief description of what Alan said about in terms of expanding into the backyard, because I think that's the most logical place people would try to expand. But what we have in the back is a utility room. It's like where our water heater is and the washer and dryer is, and it's unair conditioned. And so you can't really go back behind that with an additional room. And Alan made a great case in terms of explaining why we can't build to the east, and also really to the west as well. We're really kind of limited where we can actually build an additional bedroom, and it's very limited. It's not. It's a small one, but it will meet our needs, and we actually like the older houses in the neighborhood, and we want to continue to preserve the older houses. We like to continue, and this site plan makes the most sense in terms of preserving one of the original houses to the neighborhood. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Let us see if there's anybody else in the audience that wants to talk. Okay, seeing none, board, I'll open it up for questions of the applicant or staff.
Just 2 real quick questions. I think I know the answer to this question, but why is it that you cannot build the bedroom in the location that you're proposing, but maintain the existing line of where you encroach already? So in other words, why do you need to encroach further? Why can't you just build further to the north and make it an elongated room?
Well, sure. Bedrooms have certain minimum dimensions, and right now we're at 10 feet. And if we moved into the setback line, we would be less than 8 feet. And that is not, that doesn't meet code. And also really anything less than 10 by 10 bedroom is really not marketable. So they would have a very difficult time. I believe the building code bedrooms can be as small as, I think 96 square feet or something like that. So that's why we, oh, the other thing too that I wanted to point out about just going this way further is the kitchen is right here. So we're already sacrificing windows in the dining room. So, you know, by expanding this way even further, we're eliminating any kind of natural light from the kitchen.
All right, that was helpful. The only other question I have is, why can you not convert the utility room into conditioned space to meet the needs that you're trying to accomplish?
Okay, well, so the utility room is just that, it's being used as a utility room. They have storage back there, they have a washer and dryer, water heater, all that kind of stuff. Yes, you could convert it to conditioned space, but you couldn't convert it into a bedroom because then you wouldn't have enough room for the utility things like the washer and dryer and things like that. And also that's the rear entrance to the house as well, so it creates a very awkward condition, you know, when you're entering next to a bedroom like that. Usually you have at least some sort of transition space, like a hallway or something.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, you've got 5 minutes for rebuttal.
The only thing I would just say is, you know, this was a struggle, you know, how in the world can we get a bedroom in here? And even with the design that we came up with, we had to be a little creative with our space planning. But, you know, creating a 3-2 bedroom out of a 2-1 without adding a whole lot of square footage is helping this family meet their needs. And if this was denied, it would deny them reasonable use of their property. So, thank you.
All righty. Motion to close the public hearing without objection. Open for discussion and/or motion.
I think this is why the variance board exists, trying to keep an old home with the minimal size bedroom you could possibly propose in the only spot you can fit it. So I'll make a motion unless anybody else wants to talk.
Go for it.
Move that variance request for case VRB 1927 for the property located at 3215 West Barcelona be granted as depicted on the site plan and presented at the public hearing for a reduction in the side yard from 7 feet to 3 feet, and I suppose vesting the existing structure with an encroachment of eaves and gutters based upon the applicant presenting competent and substantial evidence to the record of this public hearing of an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty when considering the 5 hardship criteria set forth Section 2780 of the City Code, specifically that this is an existing 1930s home. There's no other reasonable place to place a bedroom. They're proposing the minimum size bedroom, and this would allow them reasonable use of the property.
Is there a second? Okay, Mr. Feldman, second. So we have a motion for approval. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Your application has been approved, 5-0.
Do we get a prize for the shortest case?
No, it
Oh,
doesn't
there's
count.
2 more.
It's almost 11, so.
Thank you.
All right, the next case is VRB 19-28.
Tawanda Anthony Land Development, application number VRB 1928. Property address is 3605 West Platte Street, per section 27156 and 27290. The applicant is seeking to reduce the west side yard from 7 feet to 1 foot and the west side yard from 3 feet to 1 foot to allow an existing detached garage and awning to remain. The property is zoned RS60 and was purchased in 1993. The single-family residence was built in 1941. There's an aerial of the property, West Platte Street. Here's the property for us. Here's a photo of the front of the property. Here's a photo facing west, a photo facing east. And here's the site plan showing the awning in the front. And this is the garage, the detached garage in the rear.
Do we know when the detached garage was built?
Um,
If not, the applicant
yeah,
will tell
I'll
us.
let the applicant.
It's on the survey for 1979.
79? Well, could have been built before, too. Okay. Any other questions? No questions. All right. Good evening.
Good evening.
State
I'm
your name,
Lynn.
address, and if you've been sworn.
I'm Lynn Elliott Hodges Rydeen, 3605 West Platte Street, Tampa, Florida, 33609. I have been sworn. And good evening, Mr. Chairman and board members. The home, and I actually have owned the home since 1979. 1993 was when I divorced, and I had bought the house in 1979 as a single female, married, did the thing.
Okay.
Yes. I have here a survey from 1955 showing the detached garage, which was actually built at the same time as the house in 1941. I have a survey from, let's see, this one's from 79, showing again the detached garage and the location of the house. This survey is from 1992. Again, the detached garage. The addition of a master bedroom and bath is now shown on there. And this is what was just shown, showing the location of the awning, which has been in place since 2001, and the detached garage, which has been in place since 1941. The hardships would be that if I ever had to rebuild the garage, the required setbacks, back when it was built, the setbacks were not the same as today. If I ever had to rebuild the garage, I would be required to move it. There is a grand oak, which Resources did come by and take pictures of, that is directly adjacent. Right here is an oak tree, and it would have to be cut down. So if I ever had to rebuild it, it all has to move. The awning, again, being installed in 2001, was installed by a reputable company, Creighton Brothers Awning, who I understand they have recently retired and closed their business. But it has been there that complete time. So the awning also adds to the aesthetics of the home. I have signatures of all my immediate neighbors, with the exception of one, who would like for the variance to be granted for both the awning and the garage. Adjacent to, here's where the awning is. I've got gravel here along the drive so that any water goes into the ground or down the driveway. As you can see here, this was taken the day that we had like 4 inches of rain. All along the house, on all sides of the house, are complete 7-inch gutters so that any water coming off the roof is not going onto the awning. And I think that's all I have to say.
Okay, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on this application, petition? Please come forward.
I am Dave Rydeen. I live at 3605 West Platte, 33609, and I have been sworn. The other issue that I would say as far as the awning is, as hardship-wise, is that it covers the part of the driveway that's right next to the house, so we can't, it's covering the driveway, so we can't move it like somewhere else, like that other lady with the daycare. You know, it's not something we can put in the backyard because it's there to cover the driveway. So from that perspective, we really can't put it anywhere else. And it has been there for that many years, and nobody has ever said a thing about it up until now. And there's reasons that it's coming up now, but I will hold off on getting into that unless it's necessary.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Name, address, and if you've been sworn.
My name is Elizabeth Simon. I live at 3607 West Platte Street. I'm the adjacent neighbor that is very highly affected by what's going on with his property. They've stated a few facts, but have left out others. They do have gutters that are on their roof to stop the water from running down the roof, but they don't have anything protecting the water that runs down the awning, which has caused for me to have to replace my sod 3 occasions in the last 12 years I've lived there, because the massive amount of water that falls onto my property has killed my grass, especially because they have allowed overgrowth of their trees that, because of the lack of space between their awning and their back shed, causes the trees to go out over onto my property. They don't upkeep it because they don't have access to my property, and those trees eventually grow to the point where they're at floor level, and I've had problems with them due to the fact that I've had to replace my sprinkler systems and move them inside my property because of the tree growth that occurs between their property and mine, and the lack of space that is there now, causing the overgrowth of branches going into my property. And also, I had to replace my fence and lose about 1 foot from my property line in order to give space between their property line and mine, so that my fence wasn't damaged again, because they continue to put things between their property and my property, and all the weight goes onto my chain link fence and literally completely ruined the whole entire east side of my property line. And I had to go in contract last year to put a PVC fencing and move in from my property line about 1.5 feet or a little bit over a foot. So now I'm losing property to remedy the situation, which in the future could cause, problems with me reselling my property if I chose to. And between the shed and my property line, we have transformers back there, and we have the electrical cords that are very low, and we have a palm tree and a pine tree that I had requested to get removed, but it was denied because I guess they were protected. And every time those branches, especially from that palm tree, fall, they end up falling on her roof. And because there is no space between her roof on her back shed and my property line, they literally hang over the wires, the electrical wires that run to the transformer. And that has caused problems in the past where TECO has had to come and fix all that. And to me, it's a safety issue, because that shed is rotten in many parts, because it's an old shed and it's wood, and the electrical cords are literally butting onto both the shed, my fence, and everything, and it causes a hazard. And that concerns me, because I do have children that live at the house with me, and I feel that she's mentioned that there's an oak in the middle, but that she doesn't mention that there's a whole other side of the yard that shed could be moved. And as far as the gentleman's comment on the awning, if you go past the front the front section where the awning is, and you move the awning, when you go in past that section, it actually goes in, I don't know, maybe another 15 feet to the east, where they could put that awning, and they have all that parking pad to use with an awning. So that awning doesn't necessarily have to be abutting to my property line. And that's all I have to say for right now. And I did have pictures to show all the problems I'm having, but unfortunately, my battery died. I wasn't expecting to be here for 5 hours. So
did my battery.
And thank you very much for
Thank you.
hearing me out. Thank you.
And thank you for hanging in.
Okay.
Is there anybody else in the audience that wants to speak? Okay, board, have any questions?
Do I get a rebuttal?
Well, I have one question
Oh, okay.
for the neighbor. You're saying the word shed. Are you calling the which I believe is a garage. Are you calling the garage a shed?
I'm calling it a shed.
Okay,
It stores stuff, it doesn't store a car.
okay,
So-
all right. I wanted to be sure there wasn't another structure.
No, no, it's a garage, yes.
Okay, that was my only question.
Okay, thank you.
No other questions? You have 5 minutes for rebuttal.
I would like to clarify a little bit about why her new PVC fence was moved in. It's because she has a chain link fence that she did not remove. So therefore, the white PVC fence had to be placed on the opposite side of the chain link. And as I showed in the pictures, there is no shrubbery here along the driveway. And you can see where my existing fence was and where her PVC is through the fence there. There originally was no chain link at this point. And also when they put in the PVC fence, it's hard to see here, but when they dug for the supports, the dirt is all lined up there. So the water cannot go there. And I must also say, as far as her grass dying, she has no gutters on her house. So therefore, all the water runs directly off her house into her yard. Are there any other questions? I know everybody's tired.
If you have more time.
Well,
Well, I'll throw something in. So as far as the tree issue goes, you know, everybody knows if somebody has, trees are growing into your yard, on your side of the yard, you can trim those trees. So I don't really understand. I mean, a lot of people have trees that come over from the other people's yards. Trim them if you don't like them. I would also submit that this is really kind of a retaliatory thing because about 6 or 7 years ago, we were out of town. My stepdaughter called, said she's cutting down the tree. So she took pictures of these people that Elizabeth had cut down the tree, and there was 2 problems with that. It was a grand oak that she did not have a permit to cut down, and about 80% of the tree was not even on her property. It was on the other neighbor's property, who was an older lady that had to go to Georgia. So her daughter could take care of her, so there was nobody to stop her. The city went after her, and she was found guilty of the, whatever you want to call it, and she was fined several $1,000s. So since that time, because they used the pictures that my stepdaughter took, she's had a grudge against us, and so I think that is more what this is about, really.
And you can see the tree that was cut down, which is this one right here. And that's what it looked like.
Okay, is that it? Okay, all right. Motion. No, I'm sorry, you can't. Motion to close the public hearing without objection. For board discussion and motion to approve. Okay, any discussion? The only thing that I see here that would cause me issues with the awning is that per the site plan, there appears to be 35-foot front yard setback. This is an RS 60, which is a 25-foot required. There does appear to be adequate room to do some kind of permanent or even awning in the front yard, as we heard from the neighbor.
May I?
No, and
Still have the same.
you know, the issue of the garage, I wouldn't have a problem seeing that grandfathered in. So whether or not, the board sees it fit to leave the awning or maybe cause it to get moved, that would be the only thing that I saw or heard.
I agree. I think obviously a garage built in 1941 should be a candidate for vesting. I did not see the singular, unique nature of the property or the building that requires a awning on the side yard that goes 1 foot to the property line. The reason that we often shy away from things of that nature is exactly the reasons that the neighbor's stating. Those are the reasons that we avoid awning structures and sheds and things from being 1 foot off the property line. So I think we're seeing the realization of why that code exists. That doesn't mean that same situation isn't happening with the garage, but the garage was there when the property was built, which presumes that it was allowed at the time, and I don't see a reason why we would change that, but can't see a reason why I would support keeping that awning structure that wasn't permitted and doesn't meet code and have any hardship that requires it.
Well, particularly since the awning was installed by the applicant, unlike the garage.
But it was there 8 years
I'm
after
sorry,
she.
No, I'm sorry, we're done. Mr. Fallon, you have any thoughts?
We're talking about an awning that's been there for 17 years. I mean, Mr. Pastor is right. There's nothing to say it can't be somewhere else, but it has been there for 17 years. It hasn't been a problem for 17 years. And so to some degree that mitigates the concern because it's been there for nearly 2 decades without trouble.
If you approve it, it can be there for another 2 decades.
Well, if it lasts that long, and who knows if it's going to, they'd have to get
Rebuilt, though. Once we approve it, it can be rebuilt.
only exactly as it is though, right?
Yes.
Yes, that's per the site plan.
It can be rebuilt back in the same location shown on the site plan. It does not have to be exactly the same. It can be built back in the same location.
Right, but it could be, but it's gotta be an awning, right? It can't be a hard roof.
If we
Could we
condition it that way.
condition it as an awning, as it currently exists? I thought we've done that before with awnings.
It's site plan, right? I mean, it says what it says.
The site plan says what it says, but I'm not sure what the functional difference would be of an awning versus any other roof-like structure. I mean, unenclosed is certainly something that the board has done a number of times, but the type of roofing used is a little bit more nuanced.
My issues with the roof itself, I care much less about whether or not it's
Yeah.
open in this scenario.
Right.
Because
You're
of what's
concerned
happening.
because the water runoff is hitting the.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I get that, and frankly, with a hardcover roof, they could put some gutters on it and absolve that issue.
Sure.
Well, they could
Any other
still,
fire issue?
install under drain where they showed the rock, the gravel. If they put in under drains to collect that water, take it underground all the way, I'm assuming they have gravity
Okay.
going to the street.
You also
Well-
get the speed of runoff.
Well, that's what I was
So you
gonna
can
ask.
Toss it
Yeah.
over the fence.
I mean, I'm gonna throw
Well,
it.
yeah, no, that, in a heavy rain, you're right.
Yeah, and so if, I would throw it to the experts on the board and say, you know, do you have, at a 1 foot, setback, do you have that water running over the fence and hitting the neighbor's
Depends on
property?
the height difference, but certainly could.
Yeah.
Certainly throw water
Yeah,
a foot
I would agree.
with normal rainfall
It could.
speed.
But the testimony that we heard weighing both sides is that, you know, both properties have their own water to deal with, and maybe they're not, neither one of them maybe are dealing with the water the best as they could in terms of helping each other,
Right.
which really has nothing to do with the variance. That's just being neighborly, you know, doing the right thing. The trimming of trees, et cetera, that's a totally different issue, and we're not here to hear that, so.
But if we looked at this as new,
Yeah.
like you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
we didn't hear hardship of why this needs to be here, what's causing this. We didn't even hear practical difficulty regarding it. And this is just, I'll just ask myself, would I ever consider in this exact case approving this awning to go in this location 1 foot from the property line? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Not with the testimony that we've heard, not on this site with this case. I would not.
Does,
So 18 years doesn't matter in that.
that was my question.
Doesn't
Does the fact that it's been there that long doesn't make a difference?
Not because it was self-created. If
All right.
it had been there when they bought it, maybe, that'd be a different story, and we'd have to hear that story, but in this case, that's not the case. because if the property's sold tomorrow and the new neighbor moves in and they decide they don't like it, they've only lived with it for a week. They still have the right to turn that into code enforcement.
But they bought it with that awning in place.
Yeah, and then it
they knew
rains
that
the
it's
first
there.
day. It's just like the leaves in the pool. It's the same thing. Like, in this case, there's an actual code violation that's enforceable. They have a right to enforce. In the pool, it was the opposite. They were asking for the variance, so, yeah,
Yeah, those are two totally different cases, and we need to rely on the evidence that we're hearing on this case. Again, my biggest hangup, you know, I kind of agree with the fact that it's been there for a long time, and maybe it only recently became an issue for some other reason. Maybe it was just a bunch of heavy rain that we hadn't had in a while. But I'm still looking at the site plan, and we didn't hear any testimony as to why it couldn't be out front. So that's unfortunate, and I don't really think that we have to hear it, but it is a self-created hardship, so I think I'd have difficulty approving the honor. Somebody like to make a motion?
Well, I forget how you bifurcate. Do you just do that with the regular, forget to do two separate?
I think this would be an appropriate case for bifurcation. So you would bifurcate the garage as depicted on the site plan from the awning as depicted on the site plan, and
So two separate motions then?
yes, so you would do a motion to bifurcate those two separate ones, then it'd be two motions,
Got
one
it.
for each of those.
Okay.
So it's three motions.
Oh, okay. I'd like to make a motion to bifurcate this into the garage and the carport separately, awning separately.
Second. Second, okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay? No nays,
Okay.
okay.
I'd like to make a motion to move the variance request for case VRB 1928 for the property located at 3605 West Platt Street be granted as depicted on the site plan and presented at the public hearing for a reduction in the side yard setback from 3 feet to 1.1 feet with encroachment of eaves and gutters for the existing garage, detached garage structure based upon the applicant presenting competent substantial evidence in the record and at this public hearing of a necessary hardship or practical difficulty when considering the 5 hardship criteria set forth in section 2780 of the city code, specifically that this garage was built with the property in 1941 and is in the same spot that it was then and would like to be vested.
Mr. Pastor has made a motion to approve the garage only. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Villa. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that passes 5-0.
I'd like to make a motion to move the variance request for case VRB 1928 for the property located at 3605 West Platt Street for a reduction in the side yard setback from 7 feet to 1.1 feet with encroachment of eaves and gutters for the vesting of an existing awning be denied due to failure of the petitioner to meet his burden of proof to provide competent substantial evidence in the record and of this public hearing of a necessary hardship or practical difficulty when considering the 5 hardship criteria set forth in section 2780 of the city code. Specifically that this awning was built by the owner, the petitioner, that there is no hardship presented or practical difficulty for why it must exist and be in this location and encroach upon the setback.
Have a motion for denial on the awning by Mr. Pastor. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Villa. All in favor of the denial? Vote aye.
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 Aye, okay. And I'm gonna vote aye.
I'm gonna vote nay.
Then you vote nay. So the denial passed 4-1. So, you're vested on the garage, but you did not get approval on the awning. You can appeal to city council. You have 10 business days to do that. Okay? And otherwise, you have to substantially change your your petition in order to come back. I think they have to, what, wait a year, counsel? You would have to wait a year, but if you're in a code violation, you're gonna have to deal with that regardless. So that's not us, that's that's the code enforcement people.
May I ask a question? It was suggested that we move the awning. If we move it towards the front, we're still gonna have the same setback
No,
issue.
you would have to meet all the setbacks if you move it. You'd have
'Cause
to meet
there's
the
nowhere
side,
else.
and you'd have to meet the front.
Okay,
Okay.
well, there's nowhere else because of the location of the house.
Well, you'd have to go figure that out.
Okay, well, there's-
And if you wanted to come back with that request, that's a totally different request than what you had tonight. So you could come back sooner than later with a different site plan for the awning. Okay, so you have that right. Okay, and you can get clarification from zoning if you need it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our last case.
No, we're done.
Oh, we are done. Wait a minute, we're done. I thought there was somebody else sitting way